Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast, brought to you by our friends at BetUS. We are back, and we are doing another Hall of Fame episode. We are going to shamelessly continue to steal this concept from the Big Picture Podcast until they either sue us or Sean Fennessy comes on the pod. Those are the only two outcomes. Back with us, back with me, back here, whatever, to do another episode of the Hall of Fame is, of course, Andrew Claudio. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, John.
How are you?
Feeling much better. But just behind the scenes, I had a week, a bug. We'll call it a bug. One that a lot of us are very familiar with over the last couple of years. So familiar that my wife caught it too. So it's been a week in the Claudio household, but I'm out of. I'll just say it. I'm out of quarantine, and she leaves tomorrow. So yes, we're good.
Well, that's great to hear, Andrew.
Thank you, John.
Just in time for this episode, and also, since this is a significant one and not one that me and Andrew could take on, just the two of us, needed to bring in the heavy hitters, which is why, hailing all the way from the greater Durham area,
Triangle, North Carolina. So Durham, okay. Chapel Hill.
Okay.
That whole scene.
I was close.
You're close.
DJ Zullo. Hello, DJ. How are you?
My friends. I'm good. I had said bug a couple of weeks ago. Things still kicking around these parts. But yeah, I'm feeling good. Feeling better. Excited to do this one. I've been doing some research of late, trying to relive some of those moments for our guy that we're going to talk about. It's been an interesting few years, and I'm sure it's going to make for a great Hall of Fame episode. I can tell you that.
It's going to make for an interesting one. Yes. That much I should be certain of. So I actually want to start. I want to go back to you, DJ, for a second.
Sure.
So this is the Julius Randle Hall of Fame. And for anybody, I'll go through the rules again in a second. But before we even get to them, I was doing my own research. Do your own research, DJ. And I noticed, I'm like, wow, Julius Randle's been a Knick for half of his career. And really, more than half, because it's kind of tough to count his first season with the Lakers when he played literally one quarter. Which I don't know, something about it just struck me. And I wanted to ask you at the top, what was your relationship to Julius Randle before he came here? Like, what did you think of him as a player? Like, what was your reaction when they got him? I've never asked you about this. Yeah,
well, I did a lot of my own research on his 1 year with the Pelicans, and it was sort of, I'm going to be honest, like I knew of him coming out of Kentucky. I mean, he played my UConn Huskies in the championship game, or was it the semifinals? When Connecticut won the championship, I think with, I don't know if their first or second run, I think it was the 2014 season, Randle played for that Kentucky team, and was sort of like an out of shape, but like highly athletic, skilled big man that really changed his body to sort of become this player with the Pelicans that was a rim runner, a dynamic finisher, and really presented as this like, all right, well, he is something different than I certainly knew about in terms of the scouting community coming in out of Kentucky. So it was certainly like a lot of evolution early in his career. And I think that's sort of the theme for him as a player. There's been so much evolution, even as a Knick, even from the front office on down to him as a player. So it was more of like, all right, let's just see what this player can bring. And then I got to be honest, like there was a lot of uncertainty coming into that first year with the Knicks that I think bore to how he performed, but we've seen a player since then continue to change, continue to evolve into, I think, a player that is right now sort of like in that world where you can say, all right, he's going to be an all-star caliber player. And that's the guy we're going to get year in, year out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of things said on this episode that I'm sure we'll get one or more of us branded as a Randle hater. I don't think this is one of them, which is that it was unmistakable to me when it was announced that they got Randle and they got him on the 3-year deal with the player option. It was like at one time relief that they didn't come up completely empty-handed, and also the distinct feeling of, okay, this is the ultimate consolation prize, because the talent was there. Like you said, with the Pelicans, you saw maybe more than we had ever seen when he was in LA. But at the same time, there was a reason that this guy could again, we're talking about a guy who had just put up 20 and it was like 20 something and 8, or it was good numbers, good efficiency, and yet could be had for 2 guaranteed years. Yeah. Like there was a reason for that. And then we are where we are now, 5 years later, which leads me to you, Andrew Claudio. I gave DJ the softball so I could make you look silly. Can you, Andrew Claudio, name me the 5 Knicks who are in the top 20 all time in total points, total rebounds, and total assists?
This is in Knicks history or NBA history?
Sorry, in Knicks history. Top 20 in franchise history. Points, total rebounds, total assists.
Okay. So am I going... So there's 5 Knicks in the top 5 of all 3? Like
I phrased this question very poorly.
Okay, this is a PRA, points, rebounds, assists, like that.
Yeah, there are 5 players who have made it onto the franchise's own leaderboard, just Knicks history. Top 20 points all time as a Knick, top 20 rebounds all time as a Knick, top 20 assists all time as a Knick. Only 5.
All right, so I'll go with Patrick.
Patrick is one of them.
Is Clyde one of them?
Clyde is another one.
I'm assuming
those are the 2 easy ones. And what's
the theme of the pod is Julius Randle.
Julius Randle is a third one. I will be mildly surprised if you get the last 2. Even one of I think both of them are.
So is one of them Starks?
No, Starks. I'll look it up while you're thinking, but he falls pretty far short, I believe, on the rebounds.
Okay. So it's definitely not Melo, because there's no way he's in top 5 in assists.
It is not Melo.
So there's a player that's top 5 in points, top 5 in rebounds, top
20 points, 20 rebounds, top 20 assists. Did I not say? If I didn't say that, I meant to say that.
Well, listen, with any way I can make your attempt to make me look silly somehow also make you look silly. Mission accomplished. I'll
give you 3 more guesses.
Okay. Well, then there's got to be someone else from the 90s that I'm missing, but
there is someone from the 90s.
Is it Houston? Houston or Sprewell?
It is not Houston. It is not Sprewell. You have. Is it? What did I say? One more guess.
I have one more guess. I'll say Charlie Ward.
It is not Charlie Ward, although Charlie Ward was here for a long time. No, the other 2 answers are Charles Oakley. Notable player who was here for
certain people you just forget existed for the franchise
of time
with things that they say or do.
And Richie Guerin, who played a long time ago, and I would not expect you to have gotten that answer. That's it.
I don't have your perspective of being able to say you saw him live.
So Ewing, Frazier, Guerin, Oakley, and Randle, notably not on this list, which I was shocked by, but he fell a little bit short in assists, is the captain, Willis Reed. I thought because he didn't play all of that many games, so that's why that number was a little short. I go through this little exercise to say, Ewing, Frazier, Guerin, Oakley, they are all on my personal all-time top 10 list of Knicks, although both Oakley may actually have gotten nudged off that now that Brunson's moving on up, but he's right there. He's somewhere in the vicinity of top 10. Randle, I don't think he's in that conversation yet. I think he's more along the lines of your Dick Barnett's, your Allen Houston's, Latrell Sprewell's, the aforementioned John Starks. It's tempting to put him alongside someone like Michael Ray Richardson, another Knick who made 3 All-Star teams. It was obviously much more of a defensive force. But you look at Michael Ray Richardson, and those teams were not particularly good. They made 1 playoffs. They got swept in what was a 2-game series back then. So he occupies this very interesting place, and where I want to arrive at, and I want both of your opinions on this, and then we'll go to the Hall of Fame. DJ, I'll turn to you first. Isn't he kind of just like, at this point, the poor man's Melo across the board in terms of where he is within the franchise's own history and just kind of how his game has evolved over the last several years?
Yeah, and even in when you think about Melo, it's there you need a lot of nuance when you talk about him, because I think Carmelo, you can, depending on where you stand with him in terms of like being a full-throated supporter like Andrew, or someone that's maybe a little more skeptical of what he has meant to the franchise and how his performance was on the court. I think there's just a lot of nuance with the Carmelo, a lot of things that maybe like his scoring and certain things were elite, but then left a lot of things to be desired. And then you just always wonder, like, at least for me, when things got really chaotic in big games and big moments, I never fully trusted Carmelo to just stay level in those moments. And I'm sure you can go down the list. He's had big playoff moments in his career, but I think like Randle, it's like the ability to stay calm and composed when things are just, upending around you is one of the things where I feel like those two players specifically have a lot in common. I think you see this with Julius in terms of like the mental side of things and how he has grown in some ways, and the meditative practice before each game, certain things to be able to try to manage, because he's self-aware of like moments where he let things get away from him mentally. So I feel like for those two guys in different ways, certainly, Randle may be more emotive than Carmelo, but I feel like both of them had issues when things got really chaotic around them and maybe weren't the stabilizing force, which, Julius with Brunson has now been brought down a peg. Carmelo really didn't have that luxury to play with. And forget someone on his level. Of course, no one, not anyone better than him. So that is the nuance you have to speak about. But that, when I think of those two players, that's sort of where my head goes first, beyond, just the on-court and skill and performance and talent.
Andrew, is that a fair assessment?
I think it's fair. DJ and I can debate how good Melo was in crunch time later in a different pod, right? Look, the trivia that I've always set up for Patreons and some of the pop quizzes that we do, Randle just is right below Carmelo Anthony in anything you say about this century. Now, obviously, Jalen Brunson's going to supersede both of them at a certain point statistically.
Hold on. What? He's got to stay healthy. I mean, if he stays healthy, yeah, but like
I'm painting in the assumption that if we project Jalen Brunson's career out and the path that he's been on so far, he's going to pass both of them. But anybody that wants to say like this turnaround of the franchise starts with Brunson, I think the upward trajectory of it starts with the acquisition of Jalen Brunson. But the turnaround started when they signed him as a consolation prize. And then the following season, he got matched up with the right head coach. And
bingo,
it started a marriage that at times can be frustrating. I'm sure we'll go through some of the frustrating points here. But look, Carmelo Anthony hits me in a place sentimentally that I admit my biases at times, where it's like, yes, I'm in Melo stan. I have to defend him, obviously. With Julius Randle, it's much more emotional, because there's a world where everything just stops in this country and on the planet for a good 10 months. And then the only thing I felt good about over the next, year and a half was when the Knicks came back into my life and Julius Randle had a career season. And I speak for a lot of people that struggled through the pandemic with just their mental health and their ability to move on to something and find a distraction. And Julius Randle that year did that for a lot of us. And like that, going through the We Here season, I'm very curious how I'm going to pinpoint and not just have my whole list be Julius Randle We Here season games, because that season it meant so much that even when it ended, I was like, yeah, but what you did for me had so much more to do than like winning a playoff series and performing well. Like what you did was get a lot of us out of a very dark place. And that's why I'm very interested to see where we go with this list today.
I am too, and I don't want to belabor the point that much more. We're going to get into it, but I'm just to play devil's advocate. We were together for the entire We're Here season. We were always, doing the post games and everything. So it's not like I wasn't right there with you with all of that. And yet I find it increasingly tough through no fault of Randle's, to be very clear, through no fault of Randle's, to continue to hold his performances in the same esteem as I maybe once did, in light of what Brunson has come along and done and kind of ratcheted up everything another notch, which is, again, that's not fair of me at all. But as I was going through things and I was going through the game logs and whatnot, I found myself not having the same, like, emotional connection to a lot of Randle's performances as I have with stuff that Brunson's done over the last 2 years. So, it'll be interesting to see if we could parse this down. I'll leave it at that.
That's why we went and got the defender of Julius to help break the tie in certain situations. We'll see.
DJ, last thoughts before we should get into this?
Well, it's just on that one, the We Here season, I feel like I think I'm more along the lines of where Andrew was coming from, but not necessarily because of the COVID and the darkness, which is, I thought, Andrew, that was you said that really well. And that was important to say. But for me, just looking back at those games, you forget the dearth of talent that he was playing with. I mean, listen, there are games where, it's a lot of like Elfrid Payton and Reggie Bullock and Nerlens Noel. I mean, for him to, even in empty gyms, which I know he gets sort of a bad rap because of the shooting in those, empty or semi-empty arenas, but to perform the way he did with the teammates that he was surrounded with, and you look back on it and it really just put to me, I appreciated his performance a little more based on just the team context stuff, which was, the team did not have a lot around him. I'm sure we probably did a pod about this at the time. Who was the Knicks' second best player on that team? I remember I personally was like, is it Bullock? Is it Burks? Is it RJ? Is it...
And then we all decided, it's very clearly Derrick Rose.
Well, eventually, right? Yes. But when they got, obviously it was Derrick Rose. You can make an argument that Derrick Rose became the most important player on the team. But they had played 50 games before they got Rose, and they were roughly a 500 team. Like, before they got him, I'm pretty sure they played, or did they not play around 50? Maybe they didn't play 50. Maybe they played like 30 something. I maybe because you know why? Because it was not an 82 game season. That's why.
Right. They played 25 games when they made the Derrick Rose trade.
Okay, so I doubled the number. That's just slightly a bit off.
Okay. And then the beauty of the Derrick Rose acquisition is they trade for him, and it gives them a point guard for second quarters and fourth quarters, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And like we seemed like we found a formula that worked. This bench unit became something elite. And then Derrick Rose goes into health and safety protocols and misses a month, and they struggle to stay above water. The moment he comes back, the season gains its legend,
Change the context a little bit. The fact that they were in a position to make a win now move, which is obviously what the Derrick Rose trade was, that's all Randle. And for Randle, to DJ's point, to have done that with the supporting cast he did it with is really quite impressive. Okay, let's get into this list.
What's up, Knicks fans who just so happen to also be New York Mets fans? This Saturday, August 24th at 4 p.m., our good friends at T-Squared Social are throwing their first ever Mets Fest. Tickets are $50, but here's a fun thing. Because you are a Knicks Film School listener, subscriber, watcher, supporter in any way, they're giving a 20% discount. So use the link in the description of this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your podcast feed, and get 20% off. So that's a $40 ticket to the first ever Mets Fest. And what's going to happen at Mets Fest? Well, I'll be there. John will be there. And if hanging out with our people doesn't matter to you, how about the fact that Terry Collins, former Mets manager that helped lead the team to the World Series in 2015, will be there. So get to meet and greet a former Mets manager. There's Mets giveaways based off of Mets trivia, thanks to the Meet at the Apple podcast. There's unlimited tailgate food in buffet style. And oh, by the way, the Mets play that night. They play the Padres at 8:40 on the West Coast. So it turns into a watch party at one point. And if you're a little frustrated by the team, and obviously the Padres have played well, but you still want to come and hang out, well, the Jets are playing the Giants that night. So we'll get to watch multiple games on our different screens at T-Squared, whether it be the Jets-Giants final preseason game, or maybe the Mets as they continue their playoff race. That's right. I'm going to be positive. I haven't punted yet, unlike some of you that have. Having said all of this, come to T-Squared on Saturday. It should be a fun time. Again, starts at 4 p.m. Tickets are available using the discounted link in the description of this episode. Hope to see as many of you there, and let's go Mets.
We're going to do this slightly differently than the Jalen Brunson one, in which we essentially went through 2 years worth of game logs because Julius has been in for 5 years. So we each individually went through each of Randle's 5 seasons and picked out the games from each of those seasons that we thought deserved further discussion or consideration. And I think we tried to each pick at least like something like 10 to 15 games. I will just say right now, my total number of games that I picked as being in consideration for this list and was exactly 15. Now we're going to end up with 10 that we are going to agree upon jointly. And did I forget? I don't think I forgot anything. Is that pretty much it?
Yep. We'll go through. We're not going to go through every game over the last 5 years. We're going to go through the last 5 years compactly, and like you said, we'll throw out nominees, and by the time most of the time should be spent on the discussion of narrowing down.
And can I make a suggestion? Andrew loves when I do this, when I do throw shit against the wall in the middle of a podcast. Can we start each year by saying if any of us has any entries that we believe should be automatic, like automatic greens? Yep. DJ, is that all right with you?
Sure. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Start with, let's get right to it. 2019, 2020 season, a season in which I'm just going to say, or no, that's I accidentally clicked on Phil Jackson's name. We are not doing the Phil Jackson Hall of Fame, although that would be an interesting.
Yes. Maybe next offseason we could throw that up there.
YouTube short is what that is.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. That's a YouTube short.
Have to be less than a minute. So YouTube short.
Randle played 64 games for the Knicks in the 2019-2020 season. The Knicks in those 61 games or 64 games, they went 21-45. So that was their record that year. I will say at the top, I do not have any games from this particular season that I think should be an automatic entry into the Hall of Fame. Do either of you guys?
0.
I have 1
that you think should be an automatic. It is one of Randle's 10 best games as a Knick.
I missed the context. I have 1 yellow, as we called it. Yeah, I have one
nominee.
I have it in mind, I should say. I have it in mind, but it's not like I will fight for it. I will fight for it energy for when we get to those.
I have a lone nominee from this year, which I'll get to in a sec. DJ, how many nominees do you have from this year?
I mean, I have one that I'm comfortable nominating, and I feel like there's going to be overlap because I sort of stole it from Andrew from the Brunson podcast because he specifically mentioned this game. So I don't want to steal his thunder because I'm sure it's probably your nominee.
What do you got, Andrew?
Yeah.
Well, so middle of the season. So Mike Miller had already taken over. This was on, let me find the exact date. This is on January 12th of 2020. Julius Randle, unfortunately, days earlier, the reason he only played 64 of the 66 games that the Knicks played this year is because he missed 2 games because his grandmother died. And he's spoken openly about what the role his grandmother played in his life. Steph Bondy had a great article during the thumbs down season that we will go through where he tried to add some perspective to what Julius Randle has been through in his time as a Knick. And he pointed out that during his first year as a Knick, when everybody's calling him a consolation prize, everybody's referring to him as not good enough, he loses the most important family member. And he paints a picture vividly of Randle sitting at his locker, like crestfallen in tears. And his first game back was this game against the Miami Heat in the Knicks win 121-124. Excuse me, 124-121. And Randle has a good game. He finishes with 26 points. He finishes. I have the
20.
Go ahead. Give me this. The log, the game log.
26 points on 10 of 22 shooting, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover.
Yes. So that's the full stat line. The way the game ends is he hits a big 3 because this is a big fourth quarter comeback. The Knicks
his only 3 of the game.
Entered the fourth quarter down double figures. They're down 10. They outscore the Heat by 13 in the fourth quarter, with Randle scoring 8 points in the final 2 minutes, including a big 3 and a big layup, and helps a double-digit fourth quarter comeback. And then he does like the post-game interview, and I want to say that's the first ovation he ever heard as a New York Knick, which I'm sure just for personal reasons that felt really good for him, like to finally in this place that you just signed to for the next 3 years to hear an ovation when the whole season's theme was, wow, you didn't get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and they still went to New York and they got you instead. Now you actually gave the fans something to cheer for, but I think personally he also just needed something to be happy about. And you know, I'm not even going to go out on a limb who he won that game for. So that's the first game I would put into as an entry.
DJ, was that your game?
That was my game. I watched it back to sort of I remembered it. I certainly not the game, the play-by-play. And he scored 11 in the fourth quarter, including that big 3. And just the crowd, and I think the Knicks were like 11-28 at the time, or 11
I have it right here. They were 10-29 playing a Heat team that would end up in the finals in the bubble. Don't forget, the Heat were 27-11 coming into this game.
Yep. And that crowd was buzzing, a game that meant nothing. They were going nowhere. And Randle, it was probably, like Andrew said, his first big moment as a Knick. So it matters, even though there was other games that sort of like you look back, he had good stat lines. So his first game as a Knick, he actually played pretty well against the Spurs in San Antonio, but not, they lost the game and certainly not worthy of nomination for this exercise. But yeah, that game against Miami, you forget how loud that building would get. And Mike Breen would talk about it all the time when the team had nothing to play for, yet there was a close game in the fourth quarter. And Randle it was a memorable moment in a season that was, for a lot of people, rightfully so, just in a season, with a lot of bad memories. That was a good one, and one that we will look back on and say, all right, that was a nice moment in a season that went nowhere pretty fast.
I think it's a good one. I think it's one that should go in yellow. It is not the game that I think of most from this year, though. The one that I think of most for Randle's purposes, and actually the game that I think of most in general from this season, this may just be me. Double overtime, what ended up being a loss to the Atlanta Hawks in what was just, I remember watching it, and I remember it specifically because obviously this Knicks team was very bad, but they had won 4 in a row going into that game. And being the naive pie in the sky, glass half full Knicks fan that I used to be, has long since died, I was like, maybe they could make a run at I don't think the play-in was a thing yet, right?
No, because the play-in, they first tried it was in the bubble. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, but I was like, maybe they could make a run at like respectability. Like maybe, like I forget if I was thinking like just finishing the season like 500 under Mike Miller would have been like a cool accomplishment. And again, they had won 4 in a row. None of the teams they beat were particularly good, and that was such a fun game. It was a double overtime game. Randle played 46 minutes, finished with 35 points and 18 rebounds, which is arguably his best stat line of that year. They did lose, but that's for whatever reason, that's the game that stands out to me in my mind.
See, if I think of a Hawks overtime game from that season.
Oh, it's the final game of the year?
It's the last game of the year. Talk about a surreal moment. It was the entire league has shut down and the Knicks are playing basketball. Oh, wow. The Knicks are also playing overtime. Oh, wow. This is also Vince Carter's last game ever. Yeah, that was a moment.
That was 33-11, if you're wondering, for Randle. Okay.
Yep.
My game against the Hawks is not going in. The final game against the Hawks is not going in. Any other nominees, Andrew? Any other nominees from this year?
None.
No.
DJ?
No.
Okay. Let's yellow the Heat game. I'm interested to see if the Heat game gets in because I think it has a shot. I'll say that. I think it has a real shot. Okay. 2021 season. I will tee this one up. I have one game from the season that I think is an automatic entry into his Hall of Fame, and I'm curious if either of you guys agree with me. At the Mavericks, 44 points. I believe it was a national TV game, although
Mark Jones and Richard Jefferson on the call, because I remember how much they were talking about Randle's like newfound mid-range shooting and his ability to just like operate in that area. So yeah, that was definitely a national TV game, because I remember the commentary of those two.
Yeah, it tied his Knick high at the time, and I'm assuming his career high. He had 44 against the Hawks earlier in the year. But just, back when the games against the Mavs meant, I don't know. For me, they meant as much as any game that the Knicks played, even more than the Nets games. I may be in the minority on that one. But that one for me, I think was so big that I think it should be an automatic, but I'm curious what either of you guys think. DJ?
Well, for me, I think because it was against Porzingis and the fact that he was clearly at that point the better player of the two, it meant more to me, the fact that, all right, we lost this guy that was supposed to be like our savior and the guy that was going to like lead our franchise for the next decade, and we traded him. And now that we have this guy that was a consolation prize a year earlier, that might now be better than the guy that we traded, that we were upset about losing. To me, that it meant more because of that sort of context. And just it felt like in that game, the way that he was talked about with a national broadcast, it was like, all right, because you have skepticism when a guy performs at a level that is beyond his career norm up until that point. It felt like he was starting to give me personal confidence. All right, he might be this guy.
Yeah.
The shooting, shot making, rim attacking big man that is an absolute terror to guard when he's got the shot going and he's got the dribble drive game going. And he had it all in that game. And to do it against Porzingis just made it that much more sweet. So I think it's got to be close to a lock for me too.
And he was on, and don't forget at that time, it was a 72 game season. That was game 57. So right coming down the wire, he was making the All NBA push by that point. Like it was a real thing. It was being discussed. And I think that game, but DJ, I couldn't have said it better myself. That game was like, oh, this is really real. Andrew?
One of the 3 locks that I have on this season. Yeah, it's.
Are we cool locking this?
We can lock it in.
We can lock it in.
The only thing I'll add in is this is when you were still at the first KFS residence that you were doing post games from, and it created one of the more iconic clips of you spinning around in your chair. And
that's from that game.
There's that game. There's the Indiana reaction. There's the game after the Clipper Mother's Day game. Yeah.
Wow. I did not realize that's when that happened, but okay. I'm locking it in. I'm locking it in. That's great. Who should we go? Andrew, I'll come to you next. Okay.
Let's go to April 21st. No, not April 21st. I want to go to that one. I want to go to that one. I want to go to that one. The one that I thought clinched his All-Star berth. Let's go to February 15th, also against the Atlanta Hawks. Julius Randle pours in a career high at the time, 44 points to go with 9 rebounds and 5 assists. 44 points on 22 shots in this game.
Yeah.
And this, I thought, clinched him being an All-Star. I thought this officially made him the front runner. And it was, I think, the official turn we were all waiting to do. That, oh, we got a guy. Like, this season's been fun. And for most of it, we were thinking we're rebuilding. This is like he's upping his trade value. What we'll see what happens. No, this was no. We might actually like make the playoffs with this guy as one of the main cogs. And this was the Trae Young Atlanta Hawks before they became known as the Trae Young Atlanta Hawks. This is their first real season. And this is the first coming out party, as far as I'm concerned, of Julius Randle. So
Randle's previous career high before this game for most made threes in a game was 5, which he had actually done a couple of weeks earlier against the Bulls. He had 7 threes in this game, went 7 for 13 from downtown, also went to the line 12 times, made 9 of those. But 44. DJ, I'm assuming you thought pretty highly of this one as well?
I did, yeah. And just in terms of like the shot making, it was maybe not the birth, but the absolute like, all right, this right corner falling out of bounds, mid-range, but long 2 jumper that just goes in all the time. That's now going to be a thing where if he's in front of the Knicks bench, he's like literally falling into their lap as he's shooting and the ball just goes in every single time. And it was that game where it just felt like that shot was at another level. Just the shot making in general it's a really special, if you just love guys that could just get a bucket. His whole season that year was one for the ages. I don't think there's the Carmelo 12-13 and the 13-14 season, but in terms of shot making, I think this is a top 5 shot making season in the history of the Knicks franchise. I mean, that's how good he was on all levels of the court. A true 3-level scorer in that season. And that game he had all of it that game.
This was the 29th game of the season. His previous season high was only 30 points before this game. So he exceeded that by almost 50%. I mean, I would vote for a yellow at this point. If you feel really passionately about it, Andrew, we could.
You passionately. You green's the locked in, the one that I do feel passionately about. I just have this and then another nominee from this season.
So let's yellow this for now. What's your other nominee?
Second to last game of the season against Charlotte.
Okay, talk to me about it.
So that day in general deserves its own Hall of Fame. Just like a special mention of like, this was a great day. So 2 games earlier, I should say, the Knicks lost a heartbreaking game in Los Angeles to the Lakers in overtime. And Randle hit 2 big threes in the fourth quarter in overtime of that game that I thought were going to make him a hero. Unfortunately, the Lakers, Taylor Horton-Tucker hit a big 3. RJ missed one at the buzzer and the Knicks lost. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be the 6th seed. We're going to end up playing the Bucks or the Nets. The season's probably going to end in a first round sweep. And then they beat the Spurs, but they're still a game back with this weird tiebreaker that they needed basically some help from the Bucks to beat the Miami Heat on Saturday. But the Knicks would have to win their matinee against Charlotte. Now, the signs were also out there. I don't know if you guys remember that the Celtics had clinched the first ever play-in berth. And so they were not going to play anybody, like their top 8 starters, the next day at the Garden. Yeah. So if the Knicks beat the Hornets and then the Bucks beat the Heat, the Knicks just have to beat a decrepit Celtics team, which they barely did.
Which they almost lost to. I remember that game.
But that weekend was about, can they get the 4 seed? Can they actually host a playoff series at the end of this season? And the Charlotte Hornets gave them everything that they wanted that day, and it was a close game in the fourth quarter. And Julius Randle, behind a stat line,
I have it 30.
Go ahead.
33 points, 10 rebounds, and 13. Count them, 13 assists,
and 46 minutes because he played all 5 minutes in overtime. Leads the Knicks to an overtime victory that sets up all of us becoming Bucks Film School that night because we wanted the Bucks to beat the Heat, and then the coronation the next day of the Knicks clinching the 4 seed. This I thought was the final, like, we needed Julius Randle to help bring us home. You know, it sucks that the playoffs then happen after this, and that performance and then what happens against the Hawks is how we'll remember his performances against the Hawks that year. But I think this was the last, like, oh, we've needed him in every big spot this year. And he came through with flying colors with a 33-point triple-double.
Just looking, Devontae Graham, 25 points off the bench for Hornets in that game. And Miles Bridges, for some reason, not starting, 30 off the bench. Okay. I'm going to yellow this as well. DJ, what other candidates do you have from this year?
Well, I have one more that I think is I would probably argue for a lock on this one, which would be April 21st, 2021 against the Hawks, because of the birth of We Here.
New York, we here.
I think for what that post-game line has meant to the culture around this team and the performance. 40 points. I don't know how many shots. It was an incredibly efficient performance. 40 points on
40 on 11 of 21 shooting, 6 of 8 from deep, 12 of 13 from the line, 11 rebounds, 6 assists.
Yeah, so another great stat line, but just the New York we hear. I mean, it just lives on. It will live on, potentially forever in terms of a moment you're going to look back and for that season. So I would say this one is a pretty, maybe you could sway me against it, but I think it's it means so much because of everything that went around it. And it was late in the year, a game they had to win against a team that he was just bludgeoning every time he played them until the playoffs. But a huge performance, the post game. It feels like this is one of the best moments of his career as a Knick.
And that, of course, was New York's 8th straight win, which was, I remember that we were in dreamscape territory by that point, because they had some notable wins earlier in that streak, and and Randle, by the way, like you mentioned, this game, the Dallas game that we locked already, that was during this streak. He had 33 and 32 points respectively against the Pelicans, 2 different games against the Pelicans, that streak, 34 against the Lakers in that streak. And of course that streak started with that game against Memphis, which was not a great Randle game, but so you're arguing for a lock for this one.
I actually think you swayed me, DJ. If I would take away what do we call that season?
It's the We Hear season. So.
Right.
Okay.
I still vividly remember New York We Hear. Okay.
I had that as a nominee. Just a couple other ones that I'm going to throw out there just to mention them. One of the games against New Orleans was an overtime game. Randle put up 33, 10, 5, and 5. Thought that was a notable stat line. This is going to sound weird. The 4th game of the year against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where I remember the game very well. It was a close game. That Cavs team was not great, but they got a win. They got to 500. And I remember for whatever reason, I was like, man, maybe this team's not as awful as I thought. And then to be very clear, this was not a great Randle game stat wise. I think he went 5 for 17 in the game. No, sorry. Better than that. 7 for 19. This is the Mother's Day game that you were referring to,
Clippers.
Which I thought against the Clippers, which I felt in the moment was their best win of the season. And I just remember his defense that day. And I remember him going toe to toe, obviously, with the Clippers duo. And I just remember watching. I'm like, man, he wants it. They want this, and they got it done. Not going in because 14 points on 7 and 19 shooting, but I did want to mention it.
I looked at it.
Good. It's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah, it's worth mentioning for sure.
Okay. Now we move on to what do we call this one?
Wait, we missed the playoffs.
I was going to say, do we have any nominees from the playoffs that season?
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Did I skip over something that I never want to fucking think about for as long as I live, and that I would not want to subject my worst enemies to thinking about for as long as they live?
Fair enough. Let's move on.
We were at
100% kidding. Yes.
100%. Yeah, we can move on.
Quick break to tell you about our new friends from BetUS. Are you looking for a new book this basketball season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, 200% crypto deposit bonus. Fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Check out my BetUS link in the description below. You get 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business. You get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And did you know that BetUS can give you your very own personal account manager? How about that? Okay. I'm going to bring up Andrew Claudio here because we are going to look at some current NBA odds. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm okay. I don't know if you know this, but the NBA released the game schedule for all the in-season tournament games. So we know, for instance, when the Knicks are going to be playing the Hornets, Nets, Sixers, and Magic for their in-season tournament games. We're going to pick in-season tournament cup winners right now. I am looking at the odds here, which you can see as well. I don't like the Boston Celtics at plus 425 because KP is not going to probably play in any of those games. Some of these other teams, I'm not sure if the motivation is quite going to be there. Mavs just made the finals, Nuggets, recent NBA champion. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to pick the Knicks at plus 1,000. Those are tied for the fourth best odds. That Tom Thibodeau is going to be motivated to win every game his team plays. So why not? New York Knicks plus 1,000.
Love it. The defending champs of the NBA Cup, the NBA in-season tournament, are plus 2,600. So this may just be the thing that LeBron wins for the rest of his career. I like those odds a lot. You got to go with the defending Western Conference champions as well, especially since we just had Tim McMahon on the pod. Shout out to Dallas. They are plus 1,800. I'm tired of you doubting Luka Doncic, John Macri. Plus 1,800 for the Dallas Mavericks. I just love the value bet there.
Okay. I think those are two pretty good bets. Again, presented by BetUS. Use the link in the description and get 125% deposit bonus up to $2,000 for your first 3 deposits. Gambling involves risks. Please only gamble with funds that you can afford to lose. All forms of betting carry financial risk, and it is down to the individual to make bets with or without the assistance of information provided. One might say the same thing about the next season, which is the season that became, let me ask you guys, when you think of the 21-22 season 20 years from now, aside from that's the season before we got Brunson, put aside things that happened next, when you just think about that season, okay. So you're both making the thumbs down. That same here. It's the prevailing image from that season, I think, in large part because that was the prevailing feeling for that season. It was how I felt doing post games every day. What's the meme where there's all the bullets and things raining down on the guy in the army uniform? That was me, and I was, of course, hovering over Tom Thibodeau. It was a miserable season all around, and I don't think anyone was more miserable than Julius Randle. And I think it came out on that day, and it is what it is. DJ, I'll turn to you. Do you have any nominees from this year?
I have a couple.
Paper plate. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew's holding a paper plate over his face for anybody who doesn't see.
That's great. A couple of games to nominate or just mention. Yeah, I will say, even though it's considered the Evan Fournier game 1 against the Celtics, I watched back at a lot of that game, and Randle played better than I remember. The stat line it's not a great stat line, 12 of 27.
It's not bad. 35. Yeah, 9 and 8.
They're better than I thought, actually. 35, 9 and 8 against a really good defense.
3 blocks.
3 blocks. He had a couple of big moments. The Grant Williams blow-by dunk in the fourth quarter, the end one against Robert Williams. And then just the fact that he was aware enough to know this was a Fournier night and just continued to just DHO, and just he got Fournier, helped get Fournier off on that night. So, you're not going to be a game that we're going to put in, but I think it was a big performance for Randle, and a game that, with the reaction by the Knicks fans after the game, I do have a pretty interesting feeling on that game in terms of the whole crowding 7th Avenue and all that. But it's still a fun game to look back on. Obviously Fournier and Kemba's first game in MSG, but Randle, he played really well in that game, and it's probably worth mentioning based around nothing else that we have not much else to go by in this season.
It would be lovely if the thing that was born that night, I don't even want to say the words. It would be nice if now, going on 3 years, that thing finally died. It apparently is not dead yet. No, Andrew's
No.
shaking your head.
Listen, Bing Bong may be a thing that we're stuck here forever with.
Really hoping you wouldn't have to fucking say it.
I mean, just might as well say the thing that you're alluding to.
I really was trying
The
not to.
thing is, there is so much gold throughout the rest of that video.
We had De Blasio, we had Cuomo. It was rough shit, but we have the Knicks. Tell me a little something, KD. Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks? Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks? And you know what? Tom Brady's a fucking bitch. Fuck Tom Brady, yo.
We had De Blasio, we had Cuomo. It was tough shit, but we have the Knicks. Like, there's so much else to enjoy in the side talk video. That
Speaking of much else to enjoy, Andrew, any nominees from you for this year?
Not anything I'm going to argue for a lock. I wrote down 3 games, and
What
they're
are the
not.
3?
One's not even necessarily a Hall of Fame game. It's just like things I remember from this season about Julius Randle. One is the RJ buzzer beater game because he was performing well in the second half. He had a rough
The thumbs
first
down
half.
game.
Right. That's where I'm going with this. That's that. If I think of a game from that season about Julius Randle, it's opening night, the double overtime game against the Hawks. Excuse me, against the Celtics. It's the next game at the Garden against the Celtics, which I don't know if you guys remember the context around that game. I think what finally drove him to the thumbs down, but he went into health and safety protocols because that was the Omicron outbreak that December 2020.
Yeah.
He was apparently asymptomatic, but like tested positive. And for 3 games, shout out to Tibbs, Obi Toppin goes into the starting 5. And every Knicks fan is like, great, Julius Randle has
2 games.
So 2 games, but the first game, like, great. Obi, we're going to get to see the kids play. Knicks get blown out by a bad Thunder team. But Obi plays, was this the game Obi played 45 minutes or was the next game that Obi
all I remember
45 minutes?
was eating shitty takeout sushi on New Year's Eve. And I was sitting and watching that game and I'm like, where have I gone wrong in my life that this is what I'm doing on New Year's Eve? Watching this. What a shit fest that game was.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then for the day after New Year's Day, January 2nd, against the Raptors, he lost 2 games by combined 30 points. And a lot of Knicks fans were like, this is what we've been waiting for. And this is after the year that Julius had given us in the we here, him now just being like in the way of Obi Toppin playing 45 minutes the following day against the Raptors in a 15-point loss.
And then he comes back, puts up 30 and 16 against the Pacers in a win.
And RJ also has 30 that night. And when RJ was doing well, everybody was like, great. And when Randle was doing well, it was like, pass it to RJ.
Yeah.
And Julius is at the line in the fourth quarter to clinch the game, like to put it within reach. And they're chanting RJ Barrett's name. Then the first half of the Celtics game, he's struggling, which was a theme that season. He starts to do well in the third quarter. And in his emotion, when people are cheering him, he was like, nah, F you. Which is why this is what followed after the thumbs down and the FU was Steph Bondi's article that I mentioned earlier. Like, you got to understand what this guy's been through the last 3 years and how he's been treated by this fan base to just paint the thumbs down as like unprovoked is a bit unfair. But that's why I think the whole context of the thumbs down speaks to why this should be a very forgettable season all around. And then the other, DJ, I'm sure you're going to mention the other game, but the Sacramento game.
I have the Kings game as well.
It's the best statistical game of his season, potentially. His career high, but like he was on fire in the second half of that game. So
46, 46 points on 18 to 31 shooting.
16 threes. 16 threes. Yeah, that's which has to be either tie or is a career high.
I will double check it right now. That is his career high by 2.
Yep.
Okay. And then what was the third? Do you have a third game, Andrew?
No, that's a third game. Like opening night, thumbs down game, the Kings game.
Deej, anything else from you?
No, not from this one. Okay. Not from this season.
I don't even know if I have to. You know what? I mean, 46 points, a lot of points. It's still the second most he's had in his career. Yeah. So I'll yellow it for now. But let's move on because we've been going for a while here and we haven't even gotten to the 2 years that I would guess are going to make up the majority of our list. Starting with the 22-23 season, which is, of course, Jalen Brunson's first year here. But Julius Randle returns not only to All-Star form, returns to All-NBA form. I have 3 locks from this season, which I have a feeling is going to be less than maybe you guys have, but maybe not. I don't know. Andrew, I love doing this. So you want to guess my 3 locks?
Well, there's one that I'll fight you if it's not a lock, and it's the Heat game.
8 seconds to go. Randle on the drive, stripped by Butler. Randle gets it back. Randle puts up a 3. Bang! Bang! Randle knocks down the 3 with 7/10 of a second remaining.
Randle stumbling, bumbling after turning it over previously. Regained his composure, able to get the ball to go. And much to the chagrin of this partisan crowd.
DJ?
No debate. None. Incredible. It's the whole performance. Losing the ball, somehow picking it up, getting the shot off, knocking Tibbs over. It's in. It's in.
I think
it's in.
There is only one of...
I forgot he knocked Tibbs over.
I think there is only... There are 3 in my mind's eye when I think of like the Randle moments that come to mind. There are 3 that come to mind the most. One, sadly, but truthfully, is the thumbs down. One is the pose as he's releasing the 3 with Pat Riley in the background from the Heat game. And then the third is another one of my locks. I know DJ knows it, but I'm curious if you have it, Andrew.
Are you talking about him diving on the floor?
Yes, yeah. I am talking about him diving on the floor against Denver.
Green hands it off. Caldwell Pope lost it. Randle dives on it. Ball still loose. Randle to Brunson. Brunson throws it down. What a turnaround here in the 4th quarter, and the Knicks take a 3-point lead.
DJ, I know you rewatched at least part of this game.
Yeah, I've never seen him, and this is maybe a critique. You could take it this way, but I had never seen Randle play that level of defense in my life, and I don't think he's met that level at another point. There is context. It was the small ball lineup to finish that game. Randle and Toppin. There was no Jokic, so that is like a big factor here in terms of like the putting this game into proper context. But Randle, not only the diving on the floor, but the shot making. He had a big baskets down the stretch. His defense, as I mentioned, was just phenomenal. It was an earlier,
and it flipped at midway through the game because his first half, the defense, I would go so far as to say the defense was like actively bad in the first half.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And it was just this is nice to look back on these things. The closing lineup on that night was Quickly, Reddish, Brunson, Randle, Toppin. That was the last 7 minutes of the game at Denver. Fun game to look back on. Randle was just magnificent, and just he has certain games, and we'll get to some as we move along, where he exerts himself physically on the game, where he's just impossible to contain on both ends when he wants to do it that way. Incredible performance. To me, it's close to a lock for me as well.
I think it's a lock. Andrew, you are going to argue it's not?
Do you guys remember what the score was in the 4th quarter with like 5 minutes left, I believe?
I'll cheat and go look it up right now, but no, not off the top of my head.
I believe they were down 10, and that road trip, because we were, for most of the beginning of that season, I think we were all like feeling the carryover effect of the year before, that it's like clearly Fournier is not supposed to be part of this rotation. Now Derrick Rose has taken a step back physically. There is this emerging young group of Knicks that should be getting more responsibility, specifically Emmanuel Quickley, specifically Obi Toppin. And I think that led to some of the frustrations back and forth, especially with Julius Randle. And I remember going into that road trip.
Do you want to say what happened immediately before the road trip started?
Our KFS at MSG game against the Thunder. Go ahead.
Which you want to talk about the most listless defensive performance that I've ever seen in person. God knows I watched some really bad Knicks teams over the years. That was just a complete no-show job. And I think it didn't come out that night, but later on, actually, did this ever come out? I'm pretty sure this came out, that Dolan read some people the riot act after that game. And that was the first real moment after the OKC move. So they go first into Utah, and that was not a great Utah team, obviously, but struggled to win that game. But they did win the game. And then there was the Denver game without Jokic. You're feeling great going into the game because there's no Jokic. And yet, as going back to what you said, they're down in the final minutes.
So they're down in the final minutes. I'll pull up the exact score in just a second. But going into that road trip, because they were off on Monday, and it came out that Julius Randle took the team out to dinner as like a team meeting.
That's right.
And for all of us unknowing Knicks fans that think like players feel the same thing we do, and like, oh, they must hate Randle too, right? It's like, oh no, he's a leader on this team. That's a new development. And then the first two games of that road trip are won, and the second one is with their what they call him, the sergeant, leading them to a victory. So I remember that. Sorry. I think that's why that one absolutely has to be a lock, because it was a reminder of his place on this team, what he can be for this team's success when he's going right. And it was, I think, the first good moment he had since opening night of 2021-22.
Okay. I don't know if it was, so you're saying that was the first good moment for Julius that year?
I would say so.
Well, just to put that into a little bit of context, up into that Denver game, so 14 games, his averages on the season were 20 points, 45% from the field, 33% from three, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. Since that, after that Denver game, so 62 game stretch, 26 points per game, 10 rebounds, 46% from the field, and then took 8.8 threes after that Denver game. Before that Denver game, it was 5.8. So he had upped his 3-point volume. He was scoring better. He was rebounding better. It seemed like something switched after that Denver game that he carried on through the season. So in that regard, it does feel like it meant more than just that game. It meant that it turned his season around potentially, and the teams as well. If you could, if you think about it,
DJ, I don't know if you feel the same, but like, and I guess John, this question's for you too. But like, we're 15 games into this season, the 22-23 season. To that point, any good feeling I had that involved the Julius Randle good game was either superseded by something else like Jalen Brunson, or like, oh, quickly played well, or like something else. There was never a game that I was like, hell yeah, Julius Randle. And I remember the Knicks Twitter account sending out the play-by-play list video of the last shot, and it was just like the social media person with their phone watching the last shot. Or Jamal Murray missed 3, and then Randle gets the rebound, and his whole team goes to celebrate with him. Yeah, and it was like they're celebrating with their guy, and it was a reminder. Oh, this is our guy. Like that guy from the We Here season is still in there. Yeah, and it was the beginning, I thought, of the good vibes of that year returning, which they had since left during the season before.
There were a few more bumps, most notably the Dallas game, but yeah, that was where it started. You're right.
Yeah.
I have one more lock from this season, which should not. I don't think should be a surprise to anybody. DJ, you want to take a stab?
Are we still in the regular season at this point?
Regular season.
Yeah, I have a thought, but I also want to wax poetic about the Miami game if I can. But we'll go back. After we lock in the game, he had 57.
Yes.
Okay.
57 points. It was the third highest scoring game in Knicks history at the time. It's now the fourth. Like what he did, it was like I remember writing about this game. I wrote about it, I think, a couple times. There was like a stretch of, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of game time where it was, I don't think I had ever seen a Knick at the very least be that unstoppable. In the
third quarter of that game. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah. And maybe, kind of ran out of gas at the end. And obviously they lost the game, which was incredibly frustrating because that whole season, that's the thing. When they got off to the start that they got off to that year, every game just took on this outsized importance. And it's like, every game that they were close, you felt like, oh, we got to get this game. But yeah, 57 was pretty cool. Okay. Who else wants to throw out a game? And then we'll wax poetic about the Miami game before we finish.
Oh, I was going to continue. I don't know if DJ had something to add about the 57-point game.
Oh, sure.
that his stat line at third quarter of that game, for everybody that doesn't remember, 26 points, 9 of 10 shooting, 5 of 6 from 3, 3 of 4 from the field. We were on playback that night, and I remember the first half. I forget if someone on the Timberwolves was going off. Torian Prince.
That was the Torian Prince game.
Yeah.
Right. So like they were 10 of 13 as a team from 3, the Timberwolves. Yeah. And we were like, oh my gosh, they're killing us from 3. And then Mike Breen just this throwaway line with like 30 seconds left in the first half. It's like, I know a lot of this has been made about the Timberwolves shooting in the first half, but Julius Randle has 26 points. And we're like, Julius Randle has 26 points at halftime, and then he doubles it in the third quarter. So that was individually one of his best nights.
Yeah, I think one of the more iconic shots of his career is a step back against Naz Reid. I think it might have been the last 3 he made, but just the dancing isolation step back from like around the left slot, just an incredible shot. I think it was a bang moment for Mike Breen on the call. The crowd going crazy. Just a phenomenal. It's a true shame that they ended up losing that game, but one of the great offensive performances in the history of the franchise.
Totally. Okay. Andrew, do you have what other nominees? I'm sure you have some other nominees from this year.
So there are other like smaller games that you could go to. There's like, he had 46 against Washington in one game. He had 42 against Detroit in one game. He had 41 in a loss against the Spurs the day after, or 2 days after, I should say, the infamous other Dallas game. But I mean, there's one that we've never done this where we rank the 10. I think this is my number 1 Julius Randle moment ever. And a lot of that has to do with how much I hate that team. A lot of it has to do with
you're talking about the Miami game.
The Miami game. Like the light at the end of the tunnel being an oncoming train that I thought I was seeing, that they were going to blow a second half lead. There's I had just started doing pregame pods and May had just had a very confrontational podcast with Giancarlo where he went full Miami Heat, New York Yankee fan, where it's like, oh, that's cute. You guys are experiencing success and enjoying it. Bit like it may have also come to fruition in the playoffs, but I was like, I would really like the Knicks to win this game so I could talk a lot of shit about the Miami Heat afterwards. And I saw that opportunity fumbling away in the last few seconds. And the beauty of his game-winning shot is the shock of it. He's only made one shot in the final 5 seconds of a game to win ever.
Oh, I didn't know
ever.
That.
He's like 1 for 14 in those situations. He's made one to tie. Like during the We Here season, he sent the Knicks into overtime, and it was like a Kawhi Leonard type of 3 to tie it, where it like bounced off the rim and then went in. And then like he hit one in the preseason too. But
Daniel Gafford.
Like the Washington game, the last preseason game where they came back and won. And like other than that, he's largely been a bad player in these moments. We've done a lot of pods where it's like, Tibbs, call something else than ISO Randle in the last couple seconds. And this was ISO Brunson with Jimmy Butler draped all over him into ISO Randle. Please don't drop the ball. Oh my God.
Which he did. He dropped the ball.
Which he did.
The ball hits a foot somehow and he recovers it and then able to make the shot. But that ball was on the ground, on the court. Anyone could have picked it up in that moment.
9 times out of 10, Randle doesn't get that ball back.
No way.
Doesn't get the ball back. The ball doesn't hit the rim. Like, that was headed for disaster. It would have ended a 7-game winning streak to that point. And instead, he hits it for his 41st, 42nd, and 43rd point of that game. Maybe 43 threes would be interesting. His 8th 3 of the night. It gives him 43 on 25 shots. It's in MSG South Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the quote unquote South Garden erupts because the building was filled with Knicks fans. And then the icing on the cake, he also runs over Tibbs. So like the entirety of the euphoria that came out of that shot mixed with the anxiety leading up to it, it's a microcosm of the Julius Randle experience all in like 30 seconds.
Yep. Was it that year where there was a game-winning attempt where he didn't get a shot off? Was it that year against?
Yes, that's the Chicago game.
Bulls. I was about to say
because it was building. Yeah,
the two late game foibles that I'll remember from Julius the most are the Bulls game and the Lakers game.
Yeah.
But
that Miami game it's a lock for me as well.
Okay, so that's 5 locks. Just so we're keeping track. Deej, what other nominees do you have from this year?
Well, can we go to the playoffs? So I have a couple.
Sure, if you want.
I got nothing else from the regular season.
I have a couple nominees from the regular season, but let's go to the playoffs.
But let's see your regular season first, and then we'll
I have two, both against Boston. So one is the Emmanuel Quickley game, which is not going in because it's the Emmanuel Quickley game. And if it's the Emmanuel Quickley game, it shouldn't be in the Julius Randle Hall of Fame. But Julius Randle played his buns off that night. And it was, of course, the game after the Miami game, a game which, after the high of beating the Heat in the fashion that they did, and with Brunson being out for the Boston game in Boston, like that was the ultimate, like, we get blown out by 30. It doesn't matter. It's fine. We got our win. And then they don't win that game without him. He has 31 points on 22 shots, plays 46 minutes. Obviously, it's a double overtime game. And then the other Boston game is a game where he had 37 points against the Celtics. And I remember that he had 37 points on 25 shots. It was a 3-point win, again, in Boston, late January. And it was just, I remember watching that game and the feeling of like, man, Julius has these guys' number. And that was the other one that was significant to me. So, yeah.
It's a good call on the Boston game, not the Quickley game. Because that was a nationally televised game that I thought clinched him making the All-Star team that year.
Maybe.
You know?
And the smiling Randle meme, right?
Yes, because they were up.
Jaylen Brown missing the free throws.
RJ hits the big three in overtime.
Yes.
And then that puts him up 1. Jaylen Brown goes to the line to shoot 2 on a bad foul because it was a Brunson bad foul. And Jaylen Brown misses the first. And it's like, all right, so we're playing for a tie. He misses the second. And then RJ goes to the line to sink it to clinch the game. And Randle is just smiling at Jaylen Brown as he misses 2 free throws after he just missed 2 free throws.
Yep.
Okay, playoffs. DJ, what do you got?
Well, I just want to point out game 1 against Cleveland. Not a performance that you would put in because he didn't shoot great and wasn't worthy of this discussion. But the offensive rebound to clinch the game, I do want to just make mention of in that game 1 to clinch it. But the game that I think in that series, in a game he got hurt in, was game 5 because I don't remember if
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
Well, I feel like it was a birth of like the bully ball Randle, which carried over into the second year, the next year, where he just was like, listen, this Mobley guy I can go through his chest every time. And if you remember, he missed like most of his like 4, I think he was like 1 of 4 to start the game, but the process was like, all right, I'm getting to the rim anytime I want. And then it started to change and he was starting to get to the foul line. I think he ended up like getting to the line a fair amount and making
5 of 6 from the line. Yeah.
5 of 6 in like whatever, 15 minutes that he played, just exerted his will offensively on the game. And I think despite the fact that he got hurt, Knicks probably win the game without him. But it felt like his aggression to start that game was a tone setter that was just incredibly important for a game against a team that was desperate as all hell. So for me, I don't know if you can put it in because he got hurt and the stat line wasn't great, but it felt like a big Randle performance that should be mentioned.
You could see the light go off midway through the first half of that game. Where he realized exactly what you just said. Wait a minute, this guy can't do anything with me. Mm-hmm. And he just kept taking it to the rim. And that's what made the injury so disheartening because it was like, oh, finally, Julius is here. He showed up in the playoffs. And then he got hurt.
I will tell you, there's been injuries where I've like, my heart's sunk. That moment where his ankle turned again. Yeah. It took me a long time to get over that game. And luckily there was more game to be played. And I was like, all right, I got to, let's flip the switch. But it really sucked that he ended up getting hurt in that game because I think you're right. I feel like he realized something and he was not going to be stopped in that game. And it would have been a huge performance if he had been able to stay healthy and finish that game.
Yeah. Andrew.
My memory of Julius Randle bully ball against the Cavs is actually a DJ Zullo film clip that got sent out. If anybody wants to go rewatch Quentin Grimes' clinching free throw to make it a 4-point lead at the end of game 1, Watch Julius Randle box out Evan Mobley, where he sends him into the second row. And I think that when I think of Julius Randle recognizing, oh, I'm bigger than him, was oh my gosh, he had a poor shooting night. You're right. But the physicality was being exerted against this other team. And it just became a theme for the rest of the series. So
I'm in the yellow game 5 versus Cleveland. Any other playoff nominees that we should put in?
I got nothing. Unfortunately, I agree with everything you said, DJ, that you can mention certain things. The Randle takeaway from that playoffs, the 2 actual Randle moments I remember is him not playing the fourth quarter of game 4 against the Cavs because he was hurt and Tibbs trusting Obi. And unfortunately, the Knicks needed one other person to show up in game 6, and he goes 3 of 14 and wouldn't stop challenging Bam Adebayo one-on-one. Like, the point, I was hoping he would be more of a decoy. Like, I'll take Bam Adebayo out of plays so that way literally anybody else can do something. And there are moments where he was like, no, I'm an all-star. I have to trying to exert my dominance against him. But this wasn't Evan Mobley. This was Bam Adebayo at this point. I don't know how you feel about that, DJ.
I mean, I agree with you. And for everything you said, I would say game 2 off the injury.
That would be the game.
25 points, he had 12 rebounds, 8 assists. I thought he just played a great floor game, despite going only 8 of 19 or 18 in the game. Wasn't a great shooting performance, but I thought it was a gritty, well-played floor game. Made a lot of cross-court passes off double teams. Hit RJ a few times for a couple of times at least for threes. I thought he played really well against a great team, great defense at least, and was clearly compromised. So I would just mention game 2. Maybe game 5 if you want to, because I thought he played well in those games.
Game 2 is absolutely a game if you're going to mention.
I think it's game 2. Obviously, their season ended up being over anyway against Miami, but like their season is really over if they lose that game. Obviously, going down 0-2 at home. He was not their leading scorer. That was Jalen Brunson. Brunson put up 30 on 19 shots, but like 25 on 18. Didn't have it from 3 because he's never really had it from 3 in the playoffs, but like 12 rebounds, 8 assists, only 3 turnovers.
What do you guys remember about that fourth quarter?
About the fourth quarter of game 2?
Yeah, of game 2.
Oh, where are you going for?
So how many field goal attempts do you think Julius Randle had in the fourth quarter?
Probably. Did he have any?
He had 0. Yeah. That's when he went full decoy. He was just standing at the top of the 3-point line and making connecting passes. And
right, which one of them was the Brunson 4-point play when Hartenstein got fouled and he hit the shot. That was when they were down 6 late, 4 minutes ago or so in that game, which was the biggest play of the game, arguably, because they probably lose if that shot doesn't go in. So, and that was you're right about the Randle decoy factor and the fact that he was just like more of a connective passer. That's a good call because that's exactly what he had morphed into in that game because his ankle just wasn't fully there.
I'll go a step further. You want to know how many field goal attempts he took in the fourth quarter of game 5? The other game they won that series?
What?
1. And it was an offensive rebound on the last play of the game. It was largely like as much as he could be out of the way, it was when the Knicks were successful because he was compromised that entire series.
I think game 2 should go in.
You think so? I
think game 2 versus Miami should go in. Yeah. Right now we only have 5 locks, 2 from the We Here season, 3 from this regular season. So we have the room. I think the fact that it was a playoff game, the fact that it was a must win, the fact that it was his first game back after the injury, I think all that combined, I think it should go in.
No argument.
Okay. We're putting that in. So that's our 6. That's our 6 lock. Let's finish up. 23 this past season. Okay, we could go through this a little bit quicker because this is more recent in people's minds. I struggled with this one for the reasons I said before, because this year became such not only a Brunson year, but it became about the guys that did what they did post injury. Now, obviously, Julius Randle was here for 47 games before that. I went through my star standings for this year, and again, this is just one kook's opinion, but like I had 30. Jalen Brunson ended up with 31 3-star performances. Julius Randle had 9. Now, obviously, Jalen Brunson played more games, and then after Julius Randle went down, it was incumbent upon Jalen Brunson even more to do all the heavy lifting. So that statistic is kind of skewed, but I don't have as many memories of Julius specifically from this year. I would have one lock from this year, and it's the Brooklyn game with that crazy ending. That would be my lock from this year, but I'm open to discussion about it. And it sounds like, Andrew, you might have something else.
My first lock when I first started writing down games for this season was the first game with Anunoby.
That's the other game that I have written. I have two games nominees from this year: the Brooklyn game and the Minnesota game.
Okay, the Brooklyn game, he wasn't particularly good. The first half, they weren't even particularly good. They
were bad.
So like collectively, I thought like the Randle dunk to finish the play that was like the Anunoby block to the Hart rebound, the pass to Brunson, the pass then to Randle to slam it home in contested to give that whole sequence. Exactly. The DJ's doing the
binoculars where the Nets fans.
But that's why my person, the Minnesota game was a better game, and there were other games that you could point to that he had better games. My prevailing memory from this year will be for him was the end of that Brooklyn game. And by the way, for what you say was I agree with you. It was not a great performance. He had 30 points on 19 shots, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. He was good.
It was fine stat line. I just remembering the game, Mikal Bridges ate his lunch a lot in that first half.
Oh, that's fair. The first half was not good. Nobody showed up really in the first half.
It's why I go to the Minnesota game, because do we remember Jalen Brunson's stat line?
Not good.
Did he go?
It was the worst. It had to be
4 of 16 or something.
5 of 23 in that game. Shout out Jaden McDaniels. Julius Randle, on the other hand, with McDaniels switching on to him, with Gobert switching on to him in the paint. Just a lot of really good defenders coming at him that game. Julius Randle finishes with 39 points on 24 shots and is their driving force in the final minute and a half of the game, hitting. I mean, DJ, the contested shots Julius Randle is hitting. And to your point about bully ball, it wasn't like mid-range fadeaway Julius Randle shots. He was getting to the rim, and there's this and one where he shrugs off his shoulders.
Yeah, the LeBron shrug.
Right, to get off me. Yeah. And that felt like in an emotional 72 hours after the trade. We're still really good. We might actually, we're going to be better too, because this guy now has more room to operate. So that I think was the first game I thought of.
We should note, though, not his season high, second highest scoring performance to a 41-point game that he had in what was a 24-point loss at Milwaukee on December 5th.
We watched that game together. That was the in-season tournament game where the Bucks did not miss a three-pointer.
Yep. Oh, my God. Yes, now, that is.
You guys are going to look at your game log and see that they missed threes that night. That's fake news. They did not miss a three-pointer in that game. And I remember, DJ, we watched the first half, and we were like, the Bucks aren't missing, but neither is Julius Randle. And then, John, you joined us late, and you came on. And you were like, "The Knicks are going to win this game. There's no way the Bucks are going to not miss a three-pointer."
And then they kept,
and then they just didn't miss a three-pointer.
That said, I do not think that's going in. That's unless you guys.
I wrote it down as a yellow, but it's not. It's not a game I want to remember from that.
So let's put in the Minnesota game. If you don't feel that strongly about the Brooklyn game, it doesn't have to go in. But we have spots at this point.
We have spots. I have other nominees from years past that I'd prefer personally. But
okay, so then DJ, let's go to you. What do you have from this last season?
Well, I have to admit, I thought I would have more when I started the exercise. For 23, for the 20th. But you think about it, there's nothing for November basically because of how it started, and then you basically have December, and then you have 2 months to. It's not a lot of games to pick from. So I will just point out the Phoenix game early in the year. This was late November. They end up losing the game, but it was the birth of the Randle rampage, where in the third quarter, it just all turned and he became this dominant force. And I feel like since that, you put that line in the sand at that game, the rest of the season up until he got hurt, he was an all-NBA performer. Up into that juncture, the struggles were real. So go ahead.
I'll say the numbers real quick.
Yeah.
Going into that game, he had played 15 games, was averaging 19 points, and shooting God.
Yeah.
This can't be actually the number. 38% from the field and 27.5% from three. Starting with that Phoenix game, 26.3 points per game, 51.4% from the field. And that's even with the threes still didn't really come around, 33% from deep. But I mean, you're absolutely, that's a great call by you, DJ, that game kind of turned the season around. It's a great
felt
call.
Important. Yeah, because it was a short, he got a little bit closer to the basket. It wasn't the 18, 20 foot jump shot. It was like 10 to 13, 10 to 14 feet.
That was the Booker game, by the way, for anybody who doesn't remember. Yeah.
Which, listen, this is the Julius, he'll give it and he'll take it because it was the last, he was the guy Booker got that three off, and Julius was with the late contest and the whole thing. But that was an important game. And then just the Toronto game later in the year. This was another Randle Rampage game. Not a game you're going to remember. 34 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. This was on
December 11th.
December 11th. Thank you. Against a team with a lot of defensive wings, including OG Anunoby, who just couldn't guard him in that game, which was fun to look back on.
That's a good. I remember he ate Anunoby's lunch.
Yep. And then he had that dunk on the baseline against Scotty Barnes where he got the tee first, smacking the glass, and then had the big reaction afterwards and was really It was one of those like reactions where you don't necessarily, it was other than that in the Denver game, you really don't see him emote in that manner. In that Toronto game, he did, because he was in this mode of like, I'm just going to be the biggest, baddest dude on the planet every time we play a game. And that game was a perfect microcosm of that sort of like bully ball, which was, to me, that's the Julius Randle theme for the 23-24 season for me.
That's well said. Should we consider the game where he got injured?
Just not for the Hall of Fame, but I recognize its significance in his story. Like, I gotta be honest, like the Kings game later in the year, I think is a more representative game because it was the day that we found out he was gone for the season.
Yeah. Okay. So here's where we're at. We have 7 locks. From the We Here season, 44 at Dallas, and the April 21st game against the Hawks, the birth of We Here. In the 22-23 season, the game at Denver, the game winner at Miami, 57 versus Minnesota, and then playoffs game 2 versus Miami, and then 39 versus Minnesota this past season, OG's first game as a Knick. We have 3 spots left. I'll go through very briefly, I think, the games that are most under consideration. Andrew, DJ, tell me if I've missed anything. Mm-hmm. The Heat win after his grandmother passed away. That's from the 2019-2020 season. 44 versus the Hawks from the We Here season. And then, Andrew, you mentioned the second last game versus the Charlotte Hornets, where he had a triple-double, and it didn't secure them their playoff spot, but it all but secured them in the playoff spot. The 46 points he had versus the Kings in the 21-22 season. We also mentioned game 5 versus Cleveland. And then from this past year, the game against Brooklyn that ended on the crazy play, the 28 points versus Phoenix, the start of his turnaround. And that is it. So from those, I think I would go... I think the Heat game after his grandmother passed away, I think that should go in.
I think you're right.
I had it in. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I agree.
I also think, and Deej, credit to you again, you made a compelling case, the 44 versus the Hawks. Because it was...
Oh, the birth that We Hear, I thought was already in.
No, wait, that's 4... wait, hold on. Is that the same game? I think I made
the Hawks. He scored 40 in.
So he has 2 games at the Garden that year.
There are 2 big 40. Hawks games.
Yes,
that's the thing.
The one I'm talking about is the 44-point one that we just yellowed. And that's where I thought, like, remember when they were doing the post-game interview with like Rebecca Harlow is in the stands.
Yeah.
And Julie, right. Yeah. And then all the guys are near the tunnel with a microphone. All of them interrupt Randle's post game, and they're just yelling all star into the mic, like off mic. And that I thought was the first, like, this is a thing, a movement amongst the Knicks to make him an all-star. That's the first Atlanta game. The second one is
the 44-point Atlanta
right.
game.
The 40-point game was the overtime game where Trae Young got hurt. But to DJ's point, Randle's post-game presser ends, or post-game interview ends with New York, we hear.
Okay. That game is already in. I'm suggesting we put in the one you're talking about, 44 versus the Hawks earlier in the year.
Put them both in. Yes.
Okay. So they're both in. So I mean, we have two Hawks games from that year, which feels
ironic.
Yeah, ironic. Let's go with ironic. That's a good word.
How many do we have in right
That's now? That's 9.
Okay.
I mean, I don't feel that passionately about the Brooklyn game from this year.
I see 2 candidates. That's one of them.
What's the other one?
The other one is the opening night. I'm just gonna call it the Bing Bong game, like the double overtime against the Celtics.
We're not putting the Bing Bong game in.
So we could, if we just call it the opening night game of 21-22, that would be fitting if the best moment of Julius Randle's 21-22 season was the first moment.
You know, it may be breaking the rules a little bit. The thumbs down game? No.
In the spirit of
it is it's not the defining game of his Knicks career, but it might be the most memorable one.
It's the most negative one though. Like unfortunately it doesn't meet the spirit of a Hall of Fame.
Can you spin it that it like was the low point and has been mostly on the up and up since then? Is that Deej? Were you going to say something?
Well, I just, if you think about a Hall of Fame as a museum that will sort of span, not, it's mostly going to skew positive, but it will mention things that are part of the overall like package of a player. I think there's an argument to say that game was, the bottom, and that it has been mostly positive since. I think there's a compelling case for it. Partly because I don't think we have another option here that makes a ton of sense as a lot.
There are options but I don't.
Can I give my ultimate pushback?
Sure.
If we go to the Baseball Hall of Fame now and look at David Ortiz's plaque, do we see on the plaque that there's a positive drug test on it?
Because there's nothing positive. Okay. Well, other than a lot of home runs, there was no, like, let's just be frank about Julius Randle's biggest struggle since he has come here. I would argue has been above the neck, not below the neck. And I wonder, was that moment not one that maybe not directly, but eventually pushed him towards, like we saw, he would get kind of, or he's gotten more into like pregame meditation and things of that nature. Like, how much did that moment, because that was rock bottom. There's no questioning that was rock bottom. How much did that have to do with him starting to put the pieces back together? We don't know the answer to that question. Ultimately, only Julius Randle knows the answer to that question.
Him not having a lot of options here, or why this is a consideration, I just don't think it honors the exercise of Hall of Fame. I think it's the thing he had to overcome so that way he actually has a Hall of Fame episode.
Yeah.
It's either opening for me, it's either opening night or we just don't put anything from that season. Well, like honestly, put this paper plate as number 10. Like at this point. Well, I mean, we'll just keep it an open spot for when he has.
We don't have to have anything from the 21-22 season.
Right. I agree. I think we just skip it and put the Brooklyn game in because it's the last great Randle moment until his next great Randle moment.
I'd be fine with that. The only other one that I would probably consider is the 37 at Boston, the game that we were talking about before with the smiling meme.
You know what? That's also a really good option if you wanted to do that.
Deej, let's pick between those two. Deej, okay. And I'll throw in the Phoenix game too.
So the three options are the Phoenix game, the 37 at Boston. What's the third one?
And the Brooklyn game that happened this year.
Game. I would say the 37 at Boston. Smiling meme. Does he have their number? They can't guard him. I think it's a worthy choice. I think I would go with that one.
Man, I'm leaning Brooklyn now. Unfortunately, that exterminated this Nets thing for good. We had to hear, and you know what? It actually is fitting that the Julius Randle narrative with the Knicks started with something that happened with the Nets, and the city's under new management. Y'all got Julius Randle. We got Katie and Kyrie. Well, here we are 5 years later, and he's trying to hear as many Net fans as possible as the Knicks complete a comeback victory and send you off into tankhood and irrelevance forever. And oh, by the way, we're taking our Villanova boy with us.
Yeah.
Enjoy the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, losers.
Yeah, watch they get Cooper Flag.
John, what I said was great, and now you just created the ultimate nightmare scenario.
Oh, watch it happen. I'm going to go with DJ. I'm going to go with 37 at Boston.
37
I think it was the most impressive. It was the most impressive performance. And it was one of his most impressive performances. And I think like it's also symbolic because like some of these games do stand out, but like that to me is the ultimate example of like, we do take this guy for granted. Like he can go up against they weren't the best defense in the league at that time, but like he could go up against all kinds of different teams and teams that throw a lot of different stuff at him. And he could, when he is on and when he is right, he could make just about anyone look silly. And so yeah, we'll finish it off with that. And okay, so here are our 10. I'm going to read them off and then we'll give our closing thoughts. Heat win after his grandmother passed away. 2 Hawks games, 44 and 40 points. This is now from the We Here season, along with 44 at Dallas. Nothing from the 21-22 season. The 22-23 season, the Denver game, the Miami game winner, the Minnesota game, 57 points, 37 at Boston, and then in the playoffs, game 2 versus Miami. And then finally, only one entrant from this past year. Interesting. 39 points versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. That is our Julius Randle Hall of Fame. DJ, I'll turn to you for first. Final thoughts.
Well, I think just doing this exercise, you realize just how incredible the 22-23 season was on an individual basis. And then, of course, as a team and where it ended up going the following year and then the unfortunate injury. But that season on an individual level was incredible. And maybe it's been a little underrated in terms of like where it stands as like great Knicks seasons of all time. But I know there's not a ton to go by in the year before. And obviously the 1920 season, we had a few from 2020, 21, but the 22-23 season is just a phenomenal year and it just makes me appreciate it even a little bit more.
Andrew?
So look, I hinted at it earlier, the good vibes and the healing nature of that season that the We Here season became. It's why, look, we focus on the transactional nature a lot at Knicks Film School, and it's part of the gig, and I get it. He's the likely move if they ever need to make a move now that they're out of draft picks. I'm personally just like really invested in the Knicks reaching the mountaintop with this player as part of the roster. I understand this is a business and sometimes you have to make tough decisions, but look, there's a game we didn't mention because they lost it, but the first game that they allowed fans back in attendance was the day that they announced the All-Star teams that year. So Julius went and spoke to a crowd for the first time.
Yeah.
And I remember getting really emotional watching that moment, and it was like a step toward like normalcy again. Mm-hmm. And that whole season was like a step toward normalcy. And look, man, like there's certain things that are just bigger than the numbers and stats and how you play or how good you play or not play. Some things are just good to be a distraction. And he at times has not helped us be distracted because he's the cause of our frustration. But for the majority of his time here, especially that season, he was outstanding and very helpful to all of us in feeling good about the basketball team that we root for again. So I really hope he's healthy this year. I really hope he's part of a really fun and successful season. And just more importantly, I'm really happy that he's part of this basketball team.
You guys said it really well. One of the 20 greatest Knicks has a chance to climb that ladder, I would say pretty significantly, if he sticks around and if the team does what we all think they're capable of doing. Just a fascinating, utterly fascinating career so far. Just overall as a Knick, and it's I think a long way from being over. I think he's got a lot left in the tank. Excited to watch him this year, and it is truly amazing that we are 10 years into this player's career, and I don't think you could say this about a lot of players where, like, a decade in, there's still real, like, worthwhile conversation about, like, what is this? What is he? What is he? What can he be on a great team? Like, what is he? What is his ceiling on a great team? And I have a feeling we will get more answers this year. And who knows? Maybe if we do this list, a year from now or 2 years from now, it'll look a lot different. But we'll see. This is great, guys. Andrew, you were going to say something. I cut you off.
No, I didn't. I was waiting till you did like a little fluffer at the end, which has an interesting way of a sentence I just said. Can I add one more random game that has nothing? Whoa, my mic just fell. Why did that happen? We're Denzel in flight, John. Random entry.
John, his mic's a little limp.
Is it?
You gotta work on that. Fluff that thing up.
Oh dear. So
that is not a job for
I
which
locked
I'm
it
qualified
in.
for.
It is erect officially, DJ. It will not be drooping anytime soon.
Of course, this is like the end of the Miami game, bouncing off the foot and back into his hands. Oh,
random entry that we've already finalized our version of the Hall of Fame, but for my personal one, a lot of people know this story, so I'll try to make it quick. 7th game of the We Here season, the Knicks win on the road in Atlanta. Randle has 28 points, 17 rebounds, 9 assists. Did have 7 turnovers, but the Knicks win the game. And I text my friend in New Jersey after the game, do you have Julius Randle's odds for most improved player? And plus 5,000. It's like, you know what? The way he's playing, if he keeps this up, that's going to be a winning bet. And I placed a little wager, and 5 months later, I have a security deposit on a deposit down on an engagement ring. So thank you, Julius Randle.
I love
that we hear, because we got paid that season, sir. Thank you very much.
So cool. I had not heard that story before. Thank you for sharing.
Well, there you
that.
go.
Yes, that's awesome.
My reaction when it was announced was much more joyful for a much bigger reason.
Yeah. I remember that well. All right. On that note, no more fluffing today. DJ, thank you for being a part of this. I know you did a lot of homework for this one. I hope you feel like it was worth it.
It was a blast. Yeah, anytime. Thank you.
Awesome. Andrew Claudio, as always, thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.
And thank you, everybody, for checking out another episode of the pod. We will be back. I don't know when we're coming back with another episode, but it'll be soon. And just as this one was, it will be presented by our friends at BetUS. Again, thanks to BetUS for sponsoring the Knicks Film School Podcast. And yes, hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll be back with more fun and games before you know it.